How many political parties are there in the US? Two, really. Sure, there are third parties, but they don't tend to have much influence at the state or local level, not to mention federal. So let's say that the United States has two parties. How many does a dictatorship have? The year is 1980, 41 years ago. And since that time, our two parties have had a pretty decent back and forth, right? Republicans had the White House for 3 straight terms, then 2 for Democrats, 2 for Republicans, 2 more for Democrats, 1 Republican term, and Joe Biden winning brings us to the present with a Democrat administration. Except 2 of these terms weren't earned by popular vote. In fact, the last time a Republican won the popular vote for president was 2004, 17 years ago. And before that was 1988, 33 years ago. In fact, Ronald Reagan was the last Republican to win the popular vote twice. And since him, there have only been 2 more popular vote wins for Republicans. That's 4 wins in 41 years. And of course, it would be unthinkable for a third party to win, because we have winner-take-all elections where you can't realistically cast a third-party vote except as a protest vote. Like, say you've got 3 candidates, a Republican that's hated by Republicans, a Democrat that's hated by Democrats, and a third option that's pretty popular with all types of people. You wouldn't vote for the third option, would you? But imagine if we had ranked choice voting. Then you could be like first choice, second choice, third choice, and regardless of who wins, they'll be the most generally liked by the most people. And that way, you don't risk your vote on a third party because you'll still be able to cast a vote for your second choice. And then you've got the Electoral College, which functionally just exists to hand Republicans a win if they get close enough. It's basically a constitutional participation trophy. But even this mechanism is so outdated and unpopular that 15 states and the District of Columbia have agreed to assign their electoral votes to the popular vote winner, regardless of who wins their state. And legislation is pending in another 11 states. But why does the Electoral College sometimes favor the less popular party? Well, generally speaking, areas with more people are more likely to vote Democrat. And the Electoral College works by giving each state 2 additional electors for their senators, regardless of their population. But does that mean that the Senate is also undemocratic? Yes. Each state gets 2 senators, regardless of population, which means Mitch McConnell has the exact same voting power as Chuck Schumer, despite the fact that New York has a population 5 times that of Kentucky. And in a representative democracy, these 2 senators are meant to represent the interests of about 68 times the number of people as these 2 senators. All because in 1787, smaller states wanted to have as much power as the larger states. They also only wanted to count 3 out of every 5 black people, so maybe we should be critical of the government these guys wanted. So while we're abolishing the Electoral College, let's just go ahead and get rid of the Senate. The Senate, by design, makes it so that places with fewer people have more power, and that usually seems to benefit Republicans. As a response, H.R. 1, the For the People Act, seeks to make it easier for more people to vote. Things like automatic voter registration and early voting would be mandated at the federal level. And who in a democracy would oppose such a thing? Republicans would.
It's going to be absolutely devastating for Republicans in this country. I think stopping H.R. 1 is more relative to Republican success in the future than Donald Trump. The ramifications of passing legislation like that will be very difficult for Republicans to win a majority status after that. Republican strategist Jay Williams.
Democrats value as many people as possible voting, and they're willing to risk fraud. Republicans are more concerned about fraud, so we don't mind putting security measures in that won't let everybody vote. But everybody shouldn't be voting. Arizona State Representative John Kavanaugh.
This might explain why state lawmakers have introduced more than 253 bills in 43 states to restrict voting access. Like in Georgia, it's now illegal to give water to people waiting in line to vote. And I get there's like some argument to be made for things like voter ID, even though these restrictions have been proven to disproportionately hurt people of color. But less early voting? There is literally no reason to oppose early voting except I just don't want as many people to vote. And then you've got gerrymandering, which again has a history of disenfranchising voters of color, all because our elections are first past the post, meaning whoever wins, wins. Like, if every congressional district was 51% Republican, Congress would be 100% Republican. If we implemented proportional representation like Japan, Colombia, New Zealand, or 88 other nations, then this scenario would be impossible. With proportional representation, if each district went 51% to one party, that party would get 51% of Congress. Make sense? I want to revisit a quote from earlier regarding H.R. 1.
The ramifications of passing legislation like that will be very difficult for Republicans to win a majority status after that.
Why are Republicans so sure that this is the case? Is it because 70% of the U.S. favors the COVID relief bill? Or because 63% believe federal government is responsible for ensuring everyone has health care? Or because 60% want stricter gun laws? Or because 61% want legal abortion? Or because 67% want the federal government to do more to fight climate change? Or because 70% want current immigration levels to stay the same or even increase? Or because 67% oppose qualified immunity for police? Or because 58% believe in white privilege? Or because 54% believe it was justified to burn down the Minneapolis police precinct? Seriously. The only hot button issue where the general public might lean toward the Republican position is trans rights, but just barely. Only 51% oppose the integration of transgender athletes. 29% favor integration, and the remaining 20% are undecided. Sure, we've got a long way to go, like a long way to go. But given historical trends, trans rights are moving in the right direction, or the left direction. You get what I mean. On all other issues I mentioned, the Democrat position is more popular, many times dramatically so. And not only that, but the Democrat position is almost always more likely to be supported by scientific and economic evidence. Republicans are much less likely to trust scientists. They're less likely to believe climate change is exacerbated by human activity. They're more likely to trust Breitbart, Rush Limbaugh, and Fox News.
Sure, we make mistakes, and we must continue to get better. But we are not a systemic racist country. We are the best system in the world.
And this isn't just me talking. When taken to court for slander or defamation, prominent Republican figures have twice used a no reasonable person defense in the past year. According to U.S. District Judge Mary Kay Viscasil, whose decision was in line with lawyers from Fox News,
the general tenor of Tucker Carlson's show should then inform a viewer that Carlson is not stating actual facts about the topics he discusses and is instead engaging in exaggeration and non-literal commentary.
As of tonight, tens of millions of Americans suspect this election was stolen from them. That means we now live in a country where a large percentage of our population no longer believes that our democracy is real.
And in defending their client against defamation, Sidney Powell's lawyers argued that
no reasonable person would conclude that the statements were truly statements of fact.
There was and is still massive voter fraud across this country.
The statements in question are those meant to undermine the 2020 election, and these statements, much more likely to be viewed as mostly or completely right by, you guessed it, Republicans. This argument is that the public statements made by prominent Republican figures are so far removed from reality that they can't be held accountable if someone actually believes them. Can you... The United States doesn't really have two parties. We have a party and an anti-party. I'm no fan of Democrats, believe me, but here's the reality. The Democrat Party has policy positions on things that affect people, like healthcare, minimum wage, and climate change. And yes, these policies are much more likely to represent the needs and wants of the US population. And then we've got the Republicans, who are hard at work trying to deny children life-saving medical care. Cool. The Republican Party almost seems as if it's unpopular by design. They're a party in opposition to science, economics, and basically just whatever it is that people want. And they're kept in power by outdated and undemocratic institutions. And anyway, it's not like there are two parties for everyone. Only 10% of black voters are Republican, which really should surprise no one. In fact, Republicans fare worse than Democrats in every racial group except white. And do you think trans people have a place in the Republican Party? This is how Blair White, perhaps the most prominent transgender Republican, was treated by her fellow Republicans.
We also have a transgender on here. I don't really think we should be giving a platform to this kind of degeneracy, which is a gateway drug to pedophilia. The best thing you can do for us is grow out your mustache and tell people not to live like you. That is the best thing that you can do to help us.
This woman, she ran for the US Senate on the Republican ticket. So many voters are realistically only left with one choice, because we've got two parties kind of, but who do these parties actually represent? If you're socially conservative or a Trump supporter, we all know which way you'll vote, and that's fine. You should be able to vote for who you want, just like everyone else. But without the freedom of a democratic electoral system, just about everyone else is left with plain old Democrats. Because, let's admit it, the Democrats kind of suck. Sure, they're closer to what most people want, but they're still bogged down by corruption and ineptitude. I'm frustrated that the Republican Party continues to hold a disproportionate amount of power, because ultimately, they only seem to exist to prevent the American people from getting what they're asking for. Through outdated mechanisms, voter suppression, unpopular and unscientific policies, Republicans aren't just standing in the way of Democrats, they're standing in the way of democracy.